Good afternoon and welcome to this afternoon's presentation. I'm Carol Latham, the Community Outreach Coordinator for the MUZEO, Museum and Cultural Center in Anaheim. And it is our wish that you, your family and circle of concern are all safe and healthy. The MUZEO is a cultural and community hub with the mission to engage the community in exploring and celebrating our diverse heritage, culture, and the arts. And we do this through creative programming, events, exhibits, and programs like this. We appreciate you taking the time on a Sunday afternoon to join us. Be sure if you have questions to add them in the chat, and you may do that privately, or you can do it so everyone can see. And we'll do our very best to make sure that they're answered before the presentation ends. As a reminder, this program is being recorded on Facebook Live. The American Opal Society is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, educational in nature, whose primary purpose is to promote interest and knowledge of this precious gem. They pursue the study and sharing of information about opals. This is the first in a series of 3 presentations. The next 2 will be offered on October 4th and October 11th. Today's presenter is Pete Goetz. He has a BA degree from San Diego State University, major in physical geography with an emphasis in landscaping structure and remote sensing, a minor in geology with an emphasis in structure geomorphology. He's been a member of the American Opal Society for 20 years and been president for 15. His current title is President Emeritus, retired, and he's a physical science teacher with applications on the theme of Earth as a closed system. Joining Pete will be Russ Madsen, and Russ has been on the Opal Society board for 15 years as a treasurer and regular board member. He will be answering any questions or feeding questions as well to Pete throughout the presentation. So without any further ado, because if you're anything like me, I am so excited to learn more about opals, and here's Pete. Thank you, Pete, for joining us.
Okay, am I on?
Yes, you are.
Okay, what did I do here? Oh, there we go.
There you are. Technology, isn't it wonderful when it works?
Well, I'm just amazed that I can do it. Let me go back here to the beginning. Okay. Why does that keep popping up? Don't you guys just love technology?
Yeah. But I figure, I'm going to come out of this with a whole new respect on how technology works. So there you go.
Okay.
Thank you, Pete.
All righty. All right, guys, I'd like to thank you all for showing up for our Sunday afternoon lecture. As Carol mentioned, this is a 3-lecture series. The first one is today, and if you didn't catch it, there'll be one on October 4th. It'll be Opals of the Americas, and on October 11th, we will talk about how to purchase opals, what to look for when you go into a brick and mortar store, or how you purchase, or what to look for with as far as internet vendors. Okay. All right. I guess a good place to start is the name opal itself. Where does it come from? Now, I have spent a reasonable amount of time trying to track this down, and I've come up with all kinds of things, but this seems to be the sequence. Apparently in the Sanskrit, I may mispronounce this, and I know that Russ is probably listening to this real closely because he studied Latin for a while. Okay, from the Sanskrit, upala. Now, depending on who you read, or that could be upala or upala, It means stone, rock, or jewel. Jewel seems to be the favorite interpretation. Along comes the Greeks, 300 or 400 BC, and we get, that's about the time the Romans kind of invaded the Greek territory. And it appears that the name, I'm going to mispronounce this, I think, Paideos or Paideos, was actually the Greek term, but we don't see this term Opalius until that conversion of power. So I'm thinking that maybe what has occurred here is that the Greeks have decided that, well, okay, the Romans are tougher than we are, so we'll find some word that sounds close. And they come up with Opalius. Is that right, Russ? Shake your head. Yeah, you smile. All right. Okay, and then of course the Latin term opalus. Now, if you really want to get crazy, in 1590 the French got involved, and they got one called opalet, and in some books say that that's where we actually got it from the French. But this could be a whole different topic by itself. Okay, a couple of little tidbits about opal that you may or may not know of. Of course, obviously, we know that, well, if you don't, the national gemstone from Australia, is opal. And that's because we get most of the opal that you see in jewelry comes from Australia. Again, this 95% depends on who you read. I've seen one at 97 and I've seen one at 93. Now, this number might change because there's an area in Africa called Ethiopia, and there's a new, it's a new old mine, and they're starting to make some inroads into the opal market. Okay, if you were born in April, if you were open, let me try that again, guys. If you were born in October, all right, you're lucky enough to have that as your birthstone. Opal, that is. Okay, if you've been married for 14 years or for 13 years and you're coming up on that 14th wedding anniversary, you might give the other half a little hint that you'd like something with gemstone, with opal in it. Opal is the designated gemstone for the 14th wedding anniversary. Okay, and the one thing that you hear a lot about opal is that there are no two opals exactly alike. Like diamonds, you go into a diamond store and you say to the jeweler, I want a 1 carat SA1 922.77 diamond, and you can go into almost any store in the country and you can find one of those. But even if you took a seam of opal and you split it in half down the long side of the seam, when it opens, both sides are going to be different. So opals are very, very, very unique to themselves. And for all you science fiction fans, yes, there is opal on Mars. Now, what's interesting about this, there are two things that are required for opal to form. One is a source of water, and secondly is a source of silica or silicon. Now, to find opal on Mars, that would indicate that there has to be water. With water, possibility of life. So if you want to spend some time looking after that, that might be kind of a fun thing to do. Okay. Now, these three items are just pictures of stuff. If you go into any given jewelry store and you go up to the counter and you ask the guy to see something with an opal, this is probably the kind of thing you're going to see. A white-based opal set in gold. And it might have a pretty nifty price tag on it. So what are you paying for here? You're paying for the opal, you're paying for the gold. I'm going to bet that you're paying for the gold. White-based opal is now I'm not saying that there's not some expensive white-based opal, but generally it's at the lower end of the scale. Okay, then we got our guy named Pliny here. Now, he gives this definition, or a description of opal. Now, this is what I'm going to try to impart to you today, that there's opal out there other than what you see at the top here. And he indicates that there are a variety of colors. There's the red of ruby, the amethyst of the purple of amethyst, and the sea green of emerald. Now, there's also, well, we'll get to it, those black opal with other colors. You'll find yellows and oranges. And this is what I kind of would like for you to see by the end of this discussion. Okay, and of course, let's get to this right away. Is opal bad luck? Well, throughout most of history, opal has been considered a good luck stone. The Greeks thought it gave you the gift of foresight. And I think that comes from the tears of Zeus. It has some relationship to their god, with the tears from the eyes gives you foresight. In India, it's the goddess of the rainbow. Now, who doesn't like rainbows, right? So that's got to be a very positive thing. Romans, Cupid's stone. Now, there you go. The love stone. Now, don't take that to the bank, guys. I just threw that in there. Okay. But Cupid's stone. The Arabs, they felt that lightning, that the lightning was trapped into stones that fell to the earth. Now, are you guys ready for one of the big exceptions? And this is kind of the killer. And I know some of my Opal Society guys are going to think this is not too cool, but hey, it's in the history book. There's one notable exception. Australian Aborigines. Now, what they thought opal was half serpent and half devil. And the purpose of the color was to invite you into the devil's lair. Now, is that bad luck? Yeah, probably. All right, but the big killer, the one that most everybody's familiar with, and one of the most enduring stories about bad luck is Sir Scott's novel, Anne of the Green Gables. In this story, there's a baroness, and she wears a opal talisman. Okay. Now, she dies, and as a consequence to that opal coming in contact with some holy water. Now, do you think that would really happen? Probably not. And most of these bad luck stories you hear about opal, most of them, I think, if you took the time to trace them back, they're going to be coincidental. They're not going to be any fact involved in these at all. Okay. Now for you metaphysical types, we could spend probably a whole day talking about this, because if you've got an ailment, trust me, there's an opal out there that'll help you. But in general, okay, like I said, there's many, many different kinds of opals, and they all have a unique set of qualities of their own. But overall, I think if you were to sift through it all, basically in general, it helps you with your inhibitions and intensifies loyalties and has to do with love, that kind of stuff. Carol, I have a question. I got all these pictures on the side and it's cutting off. Can I get rid of those pictures?
Which pictures are you referring to?
Well, there's me, Russ, Milt Roth, Carol,
okay.
Museum, and a bookcase. It's not a biggie, but it's
yeah.
Okay.
I think if we,
it's all right.
you can just go to the gallery and just change that format.
That's all right. We'll just let it ride.
Okay.
I'll just look at you 5 and remember this day. All right. Now, what's a lecture without definitions? And we're gonna have a lot of them today. Definitions. So let me just kind of forewarn everybody. This is going to be a fast and furious introduction to opal. We're going to cover the opal structure. We're going to cover how it gets its color. We're going to talk a little bit about how it's mined, where it's mined. Okay, and we're going to get all that in about an hour and 10 minutes. So be prepared. All right. Now, there are 2 types of opal, basically. There's opal rough, opal finished. Okay, opal rough, obviously, opal as it just comes out of the ground, as nothing's happened to it. It just, you just picked it up or blasted it out or however you got it. All right, finished opal, you take that rough and you manipulate it somehow. You clean it up, you shape it, you polish it, you might even mount it in a piece of jewelry. So there are 2 basic terms, rough opal, finished opal. And here's a picture of some rough opal. Okay. This will be on your left, obviously precious opal. On your right would be a little stack of what common opal might look like. Okay, finished stones. Here we have two other terms, white-based, dark-based. You're going to hear that a lot. White base is just any opal, as you can see on the left there, that has anywhere from milky white to kind of a gray. And there's in the scale, there's a number of gray positions. So this would probably go to about the middle of the gray definition. And of course, the ones on the right are dark-based or black-based opal. The thing you need to remember here is when you hear the term white opal versus black opal, we're talking about the base color, not the colors that are showing, not the rainbow colors, but the base of the stone. It's either a white-based, gray-based, black-based. You'll hear that term often. Okay. Here we go, more definitions. You guys ready? Okay. All right, we got common opal and we got precious opal. Okay. Common opal is opal that doesn't have any color. Okay, precious opal has the play of color. And then there's that white versus black. I got it out of order, but y'all remember what white and black is, right? That's only a slide old. Okay. Common opal lacks color. Now, if you find common opal that is colorless, like the diagram, sometimes there's some value associated with a transparent common opal without a play of color. All right, we use them for the backing for doublets and triplets, and we'll explain those in lecture number 3. But basically, they're just a black base with an opal on it, a real thin slice of opal. Okay, the most common colors are green, pink, and blue. And as you can see, this is a picture of the rough and some of the finished stones. Now, this necklace-looking thing over here, that's actually Peruvian opal. That opal comes from Peru. The opal that we find in Peru, and we'll talk about that again next week in our Opals of America, they have a lot of pastel based opal without a play of color. Okay, and then of course they can be used as accent stones. All right, doublets and triplets. If you're ready to know what they look like, here's what they look like. The one on the left is a doublet. You got some basalt or something down there, and then you got a cap of opal. I'm sorry. The base has got a real thin layer of opal on it, naturally, and then you put a quartz cap on it. A triplet, you have a black base, a thin layer of corpal, and again, another piece of quartz. Okay, then you're going to hear this term called potch. Potch is basically used to identify two things: opal with absolutely no color and opal with just a little tiny bit of color. You'll hear the term potch or potch in color. When you go to buy opal, you're at a show and you go up to an opal guy and you say, hey, I'm new, I want to buy some practice opal. He might suggest potch in color. And this is what you're going to get. Okay, and of course, precious opal is just about any opal that exhibits a play of color, such as these. Now, these, of course, are kind of high-end ideas of what high-end black-based opal would look like. Now, remember at the beginning, I mentioned that most of us are used to seeing white-based opal. Well, these opals here will start to rival some of the transparent or translucent stones in price. Diamond, emerald, these will get up in that territory. And one of the last, okay, now we'll explain, and again, in the third lecture, I'm going to talk about how to buy opals, and I'll explain to you a little bit more about how this color works into the price of the opal. Okay, and you're going to hear also this term crystal opal. Crystal opal is basically an opal that you can see through. All right. Now, the pictures I have here are of light-based crystal, although it's also available in dark-based format. Okay, ready for some questions? Anybody has anything? This is the time. I don't know if Russ has recruited any. No questions? Okay. All right. Now we're going to talk a little bit about how opal gets its color, and we're going to start with the structure of opal. Okay. So what is opal? Opal, first of all, it's an amorphous form of hydrated silicon dioxide. And now, amorphous means that there is no specific shape. It does. Later on, we're going to find that there is some organization, but it's fluid. Think of a bag of marbles. Well, okay, you got a bag of marbles and it's rectangular. You got a three-dimensional bag of marbles, and all the marbles are stacked on top of each other. And then just move it. Just take it and rub it in your hands. What happens to those marbles? They stay in contact with each other, but they move around a little bit. So they've got some mobility. So that's what I mean, or that's what we mean when we say amorphous. Okay, it's hydrated, meaning that it's got a certain amount of water. Now, precious opal usually, depending again on who you read, it will contain between 6 and 12% water. Chemical formula: silicon dioxide. The little n here means if this was an actual formula for a specific sample, that n would have a number representing the percent of water that's in that molecule of opal. All right, and the interesting thing here is it's very close to sand. Quartz is probably one of the most common elements or minerals on the earth. And basically, opal is some quartz with some water, and you'd think it'd be all over the place, but it's not, and we're going to find out why later. Okay, now, I mentioned that bag of marbles. Okay, opal is made up of little microscopic spheres of silica. And they form, like I mentioned, layers, or think of that bag of marbles that's got a rectangular shape. Okay, and this is kind of what it looks like. And I think this is at 40,000 magnification. Now, it might be hard for you to see if you're not used to looking at it, but you'll see in some of these diagrams, there's going to be a slight change in color of some of those spheres. That might indicate a change in diameter. And later on, we're going to find out that the diameter of these spheres has a lot to do with the color that's projected. I don't remember the magnification of this, but you can see common opal. What makes common opal different than precious opal? The diagram on the left is common opal. Note that those silicon spheres they're jumbled up. There's no clean path for light to follow. If it enters this, it just gets scattered too much and it breaks down too much and you get no color out. The one on the right, you'll notice, is kind of somewhat regular and allows for a smoother passage of light. How did I do that, guys? Okay. Now, remember that sponge I was telling about? Or that little bag of marbles you had? This would be kind of what it would look like inside. Now, it might be hard for you to see, but if you look at the top couple of layers, that would be where the structure is more idealized. Sometimes down at the bottom, it'll be a little more jumbled up, and it'll be precious opal on potch or deep inside. This is just a graphic of the difference. On the left, we have the common opal, and as I mentioned, I mean the precious opal, and I mentioned it has a very, very regular structure, allowing the light to pass through more easily. And on the left, I mean on the right again, diagram B, how's that? Okay, that is your common opal, and note that it's just a jumble of silica spheres, different sizes and no particular shape. Okay, now I mentioned that opal does not have a structure in itself. The only time you'll see a structure with opal is when it's a pseudomorph after something, a mineral or some organic material. You know, like if it's got a bone, this is a jawbone from, I think, I can't pronounce it. Anyway, one of these old guys that ran around with the T-Rex. All right, and you have here clams, and of course limbs off of trees. So the only structure that opal has is when it pseudomorphs after an organic substance that left a void. You all know how the mold thing works for like geodes and things. You leave a hole and it drips in. Same thing here. I have a very touchy little gadget here. All right. Now we know what the structure is. We know that opal is made up of a bunch of spheres. Now, the opal, I mean, the color is actually a combination of five issues or five factors. The first one is when a light hits the surface of an opal, depending on how smooth or how well polished that opal is, you'll get a certain amount of reflection of that light ray. In other words, it doesn't absorb. If you got a rough piece of opal, it may not absorb a large portion of the incoming light. I'm going to use light wave. Now, I know some of you out there are wave particle versus wave fans, but I'm not going to get into the particle bit today. So we're going to call light a wave today. Okay. So when the wave hits the surface of the opal, it can be absorbed more efficiently if the opal is polished. So the first thing is we get this lack of lack of reflection. Okay, diffraction. Diffraction is actually the bending of the light. It doesn't actually change anything, but as you know that when a light wave goes from one medium to another, it bends. Its speed changes because of the density of the material. Well, when it enters an opal, it does two things. It enters into the opal, but then immediately it comes in contact with these spheres. So the light is bent around these spheres. All right, so you get refraction and diffraction. You get both of those. Again, we could talk probably a whole 2 hours on that. And then you get dispersion. Okay, when the light goes through, sometimes between the spheres, there's little water pockets. I read an article just the other day. Apparently, there's like 4 or 5 different kinds of water content that can be between these spheres. Anyway, this will somewhat influence the dispersion of light. And of course, the fifth factor is interference. Now we know that from our basic chemistry and physics that a light wave, if 2 light waves of the same frequency interact or come upon each other, what happens to that light wave? It intensifies. Okay, if you get 2 opposing light waves hit the same spot where the valley and the trough meet, what's it going to do to that light wave? It's going to frequency. It's going to decrease that frequency. All right, so think about that. So if you got light, say if you have 3 frequencies that come together for purple, are you going to get a really bright purple color coming out? Probably yes. Okay. Okay. This is kind of a graphic of what I just said. All right. The opal, the spheres in the opal act something like a prism. We have incoming light white. Light white? How about white light? Okay. Now, the first thing it's going to do is it's going to meet this surface. Is the surface polished, roughed, or something of that nature? That will determine on how much of that white light is absorbed into the sample. Then down in this area, and it takes place somewhere once diffraction and refraction takes place inside the opal sample once it's penetrated the surface. Okay. Then you have dispersion. This is where the light is actually broken up. And I mentioned interference. This is where the light waves interfere or will either combine or reject each other. And what you get is old Roy G. Biv. Everybody know who Roy G. Biv is, right? Rainbow, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. Light always shows up in that sequence. Why? Because frequencies are numeric. Numerics have a tendency to be very sequential. Anybody care? I didn't think so. Anyway, okay, so let's go back to those spheres. As I mentioned, the size of the spheres has something to do with the amount of color that's produced or what color is produced. The larger spheres will produce red colors. The smaller ones will be blue. All right, and the more uniform the spheres are and the more rigidly they are aligned, the more brilliant and defined the color will be. Okay, so if we have a really nice, neat platoon of Marines, you know, we're going to get a nice color when it comes out. Here's a graphic of that. All right, and these diameters, these micron diameters, again, depends on who you read. This is kind of like an average. So if we can kind of visualize what's happening here, white light comes in, it goes through all the things we discussed earlier, diffraction, diffusion, yada, 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 and it comes out this color, whatever color. Okay. Now, when you look at an opal, if you wear an opal, it's going to be subjected to many, many different light sources in a day. When you put it on in the morning, you're in the bathroom, you got a yellow light bulb or in my case, I got an incandescent bulb. You go to the dining room, you might have an incandescent bulb. You go to the kitchen, whatever. You go outside. So there are some other factors that will influence the color that you perceive, not necessarily the color that's emitted by the opal, but the color you perceive. All right, daylight. Will make opal look different than incandescent bulbs, than fluorescent bulbs. Okay, now for all you physics people, the angle of incidence and the angle at which you view an opal will also affect the colors that you see. And here's a prime example. This opal happens to be mine, and the photographer was Russ. No, I can't remember who did this. Did I hold it and you took the pictures? Yeah, okay, I'm getting a shake, okay. Anyway, this is the same stone observed from 4 different angles. And notice the significant color change. So if we go back to the prior slide, and I don't know how to do that with this gadget I have, but maybe if I could turn this one on. Let me see here. Well, okay, onward and upward. But anyway, my point to this is that color opal, the colors you perceive in opal, be careful, particularly when you go to buy an opal. You're standing in a store that has a different kind of light than maybe you're normally seeing. You go to a show, and if you look at the lights that the vendors have, those little tiny lights, you don't find those hot in your house. So the opal is going to look different. So be cognizant of the light source that you're going to be wearing this opal. All right, do we have any questions yet? Either I'm really good or you guys are bashful.
Hello.
And this guy doesn't know what he's talking about.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear somebody.
Okay, I had a question about the spheres and the size.
Uh-huh.
You went through the slide kind of fast. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Well, let me go back,
Oh,
see if I
good.
can, this slide here,
Yes, and maybe just the one above it,
one,
like slide 27, just the one in front of it. Yeah, the size of the spheres. So you have larger spheres and smaller spheres and the color reds. Okay.
oh, I'm sorry, yeah, well, again, this is an average. Where'd I go? These are an average of what we've observed. If you read the initial one of the first articles about this spherical shape was written in 1967, I think, and he describes these spheres using a variety of different diameters. Um, so the colors that I'm giving you, you're talking about the size of the color? Size. She muted herself, so I can't hear her.
Yeah, what you said was the associated color with the sizes.
Right.
I wanted to just see that again.
Okay. Now remember, I'm only showing three colors here: red, green, and blue. Remember the visual spectrum. You have 7 colors that we can perceive. Now, I put in. I mentioned earlier Roy G. Biv. Have you ever heard that before?
No.
Okay. If you think about the colors that we can see red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. If you take the first letter of each one of those words, you get Roy G. Biv. That's how I used to teach my kids to remember it when I was a teacher. But so the diagram we have here, I only show 3 colors. But remember now, there's going to be a multitude of, remember the term that I used earlier about interference? So you're going to get various shades of red, various shades of purple. You're going to get more colors with variations. There could be, hundreds of combinations here. Did that answer the question? I can't see her.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
That's great. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Any other questions? Okay, so now we know that opal is made up of spheres. We know that the diameter of these spheres influences the color of the opal. Okay, so how does opal form? What is the process? Now, here we could spend a whole semester talking about this, but there are three models of formation that are kind of popular. The first one is called the weathering model. And this basically says that when it rains, the rainwater comes down off the mountain, goes into the Great Artesian Basin, soaks through a layer of sandstone, creates some silica gel, finds a crack, and becomes opal. Okay? The syntactonic model is just the opposite. Now, the Great Artesian Basin is called the Artesian Basin for a reason. It's lower than sea level, so there's upward pressure of water. So what this model says is that the source of water is not rain, it's being forced up, hydraulically forced up from below the sea level, and then in turn mixes with the sand and produces the silica gel, finds a crack, and hardens. All right. Then the third one is the microbe model. Now, apparently, we haven't got to it yet, but I'm going to explain to you the Great Artesian Basin. It used to be an inland sea, but what happens here is during the Cretaceous, there was a significant amount of microbiotic, if there is such a term, of life. Now, what happens is as this life goes through its life processes of feeding and excreting, and the enzymes and the acids from the excretion and from their death, that would break down the feldspars and release some of the silica that would mix with the water and in turn become a silica gel. So it kind of, it's I don't know, organically generated. There's a lot of discussion on this one. Again, like I said, we could probably spend a couple of sessions talking about that. However, one of the things we could do, I don't know if I'm allowed to do this, Carol, but I'm going to do it. Sometimes we are a society and we do meet. A lot of times if you're in the area and you want to come by one of our meetings and discuss something, there are lots of people there that know a lot about Opal. So, y'all are welcome down. You don't have to join. We'd like you to, but you don't have to. But come on down and have a Coke and some nasty cookies.
It's so funny that you should say that, because one of the questions that I was going to ask is, you're a membership-driven organization other than artisans and craftspeople. Who are some of the people that you like to, you would like to invite to membership, and how does one become a member? This might be a good time to answer that question since you just brought it up.
Okay. Can Russ, can he be heard on this? Because I might want to.
He just needs to unmute himself.
Yeah, I unmuted.
Go ahead, Russ.
Well, the society is joined by anyone that's interested in Opal. The club is entirely focused on Opal. Guests are more than welcome. We are not holding meetings right now. They are the third Wednesday of the month at the Anaheim Community Center in the grounds where the Anaheim City Hall is. There's a place on our website where people can join. They can pay through PayPal or send a check. We have a newsletter that goes out monthly. And the club is also populated by some of the world's experts in Opal, some really highly skilled jewelers, metalsmiths. Johnson Kankis, if anyone knows who that is, was a member. Pierre Gilson was a member. He's the guy that invented synthetic opal. So yeah, that's what we do. We have our regular meetings, and people can ask questions on Facebook and on the website.
I had a question. Did you ever go on field trips?
We have, but the places that you can get to are no longer open to the public. The local ones. There's places, but they're 500 or 600 miles away. Northern Nevada.
And I'm going to talk about that next week too. Some of the fee digs up in Oregon and Idaho. Anyway, to add to Russ's commentary, Carol asked what kind of people we were looking for. We have a variety of people, but what we would really like to do is expand a base to youth. We don't have a youth organization at the moment, but we do participate in a couple of functions that, like the art crawl that they have down at the promenade, and we have things we do with the youth. So we'd be kind of looking to get younger people in there. We'd like to get people that, like Russ said, are just basically generally interested in Opal. You don't have to be a scholar. You just have to have an interest, that kind of thing. Okay, I think I need to move on, I think. So let me do that. Okay. All right, now here's just a quick diagram on the weathering model. This is a cross section of part of the Great Artesian Basin, and you'll notice that the opal. I don't know if I have a. I don't know if I can do it. Let me try. Okay, can you see that, Mark? Okay, All right, that, you notice that right there is where the opal is. Now, opal, the good opal, quote unquote, stable opal, whatever, anywhere from about 35 to 60 meters deep. If it gets deeper than that, a lot of times it's too wet and you have to let it dry. This was explained to me one time by one of the people that Russ was talking to you about, and I wasn't quite clear what he meant. It seemed to me you could just set it out and let it dry out and work on it. But anyway, whenever I buy opal, what I do is I'll buy a parcel this year to show. I stick it in a jar somewhere in my garage, and I don't touch it for a year or two. So, okay, so this is the weathering model. We have a cross section of the artesian basin. It rains, water filters down, goes through the sandstone, and it winds up into, uh-oh, what did we do? What did I do, Carol?
I don't,
Winds up in the cracks like this. Okay, this is the brown stuff is the sandstone or whatever it is, clays or whatever. Wherever there's a crack, that opal gel that I keep talking about winds up into that, and this is where you get the opal from. Okay, you ready for some more definitions? I know you are, so smile. I see this couple sitting there holding this dog, and I think it's a dog. What is that, a poodle? Shake your head. Yeah, it's a poodle. Okay, a black one. See, black poodle, black opal. There's a connection there. All right. There are several classifications of opal. There's a couple of them being discussed at the moment. There was a symposium about a year or so back, and they had suggested an 8-category classification for opal, which I read, and I kind of like it, but I'm going to save that for another time. For right now, this is what you're going to run into generally. Okay, there are 4 types of stones you're going to find. There are 4 terms you're going to find applied to opal. You're going to find natural opals, and this is a stone, like I said before, that are not changed in any way. You're going to find treated opal. This is opal that's been changed chemically or physically somehow. Well, yeah, physically. That's a bit of a stretch. Then you got synthetic opal, which is man-made or grown in the laboratory. That's the Gilson that Russ mentioned earlier. And then you have opal simulants. And these have no opal material in them at all. There's nothing in here nothing. Where opal synthetics do have some of the original opal material. Okay. All natural opal. Okay, this is the first one. Again, it's presented in one piece in its natural state. Now, natural opal, again, can be divided into 3 categories. We have solid opals, we have boulder opals, and we have matrix opal. All right, so the one on the left is probably from Lightning Ridge, the one in the middle is probably from Queensland, and the one on the right is also from Queensland, probably. All right. All right, so solid opals, again, not capped. They're not treated. They're just taken out of the ground, cleaned up, and ground, and someone polished it up. Okay, now, there are occasions when you'll find some small inclusions. Now, in this case, this is not a crack. It's actually part of the structure of the opal. So it may detract a little bit from the value, but it's still considered a solid opal. All right. And then sometimes you'll find an opal that looks like this. It's a boundary between common opal and precious opal. If it's cut in such a way that both of them are on there,
Now you can talk.
even though it's precious and common, it's still considered a solid opal, which should be pretty obvious. Okay. Then we have natural opal or natural boulder opal. Now, boulder opal is usually found in Queensland and usually found in patches. And basically what it is just a little bit of opal either mixed in, or in this case, it's a skin. You find the ironstone, and if you can see on the picture, you'll see that the opal isn't really thick. It's just kind of layered on top of a piece of the opal. Right, that's basically what. Well, here's a better view. This is a piece of finished boulder opal. Same, and here's a not so nice looking piece of boulder opal. But you see the ironstone, and you see a thin layer of opal. That's what boulder opal in general is going to be. Oh, did I hear a question, or did I hear just somebody say something? Okay. Next, we have natural boulder opal. And this is called matrix sometimes. And I'm going to use the term boulder matrix. Now pay attention to that, because we're going to use this term matrix again later. All right, so boulder matrix is just opal that's been mixed up as these ironstones or muds or whatever they are, in this case ironstones, as they're being formed, the opal was mixed in with it somehow. So you get all of this opal intermixed. This is one of my favorite kind for two reasons. One, they're pretty, and secondly, they're in my price range, but that's neither here nor there. Okay, and then the last opal will be these Yawa nuts. Now, they can be any size from about the size of a marble to probably a football or a soccer ball, although I've seen one or two that are larger. And then they were two versions of this. You got the one on the left. When you break it open, you've got a nice piece of really brilliant precious opal. That's what you're looking for. On the right, when you break it open, you see little stringers of opal. Now these in itself can be pretty, but the one on the left the one on the right is what you will see most often. They're in the dark brown ironstone. Every once in a while you'll find black, and that's because there's a manganese somewhere, and it turned the rock black a little bit. Now these are thought to have formed by geothermal processes. This was what I was trying to explain a few minutes ago when they're jumbled up. When a geothermal process, you're talking about a medium that's fluid. So the opal and the ironstone are not rigid when these things are mixed together. The Yawa nut on the left, that probably formed after the fact. There was a hollow and gel got in there. Okay, now, whoops. Okay, well, most Yawa nuts don't look like the one on the right. They look like the one on the left. Okay, now here comes this word matrix again. Now, when I say treated, usually when someone says the opal's going to be treated, the first thing I think of is andamuka. Now, andamuka is, well, when you first find it, it kind of looks like concrete. Matter of fact, some types of andamuka matrix is called concrete. And this is kind of what it would look like. Okay, this is kind of what you would see. It would be hard to miss this because there's not a lot of color showing. Okay, now you guys can laugh at this next one if you want to. It's okay. All right. As I said earlier, we are a society, and we do field trips, and sometimes we do things at our meetings. Well, we decided to have a cookout. So we decided to cook up some of this stuff I just showed you. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to put some sulfuric acid in that flask. You're going to heat it up to about 140 degrees. You're going to put your I said acid, I meant sugar solution. So the first thing you're going to do is put the andamuka matrix in a sugar solution, and you're going to cook it. Now there's for as many people that make this stuff, there's that many different recipes. I've had people say they do it for 10 minutes. I've had people do it for an hour. We have a member of our club, who I won't mention because he might be watching, who likes to use brown sugar versus white sugar. Somebody uses maple syrup, whatever. Anyway, you're going to cook this rock kind of sugar. All right, then you're going to stir it up. You're going to put it in some acid bath, and this is what you're going to get. Now, that picture I just showed you of me cooking, this is what we actually produced that night. That's the reason this picture is not so sharp, because I'm not the world's best photographer. But this is what we actually got out of that batch. Now, this is a little clearer picture, professionally done. But now notice the pattern here. It's kind of blotchy, all right, as opposed to, say, maybe an opal from Lightning Ridge, where the colors more blend and weave and that kind of stuff. Okay. Now, there's a couple types of opal which we're not going to talk about today. We're going to do that on our lecture on 11th, and that's assembled opals, synthetic opals, and imitations and simulants. And the reason I'm going to do that is because we're going to talk about buying opal jewelry, what to look for. And these are things that you really need to be aware of, because there's some pretty slick imitations out there. And if you buy an opal that's already in a setting and you can't see the back of it, you don't know whether it's a triplet or whatever. But we'll get to that on the 11th. All right, any questions on so far? Or any additional questions?
Go ahead and ask them.
There
We
was
have
a
a couple.
question. Yeah, go ahead, Russ.
One question was, you had a picture of an opal that was bolder, and the matrix was very dark to the point of being black. The question was, is that a black opal because the matrix is black?
No, that was because near where that opal deposit, there was probably some manganese, and it got in with the iron, and it changed the color of the base rock.
Right.
That brings up something we didn't discuss. In Antarctica, there is a black, you can get a black matrix opal. And I think this might be how that occurs. The manganese gets in there, turns it black, a thin layer of opal over the top of it. And you can get some pretty dazzling black opal from Andamuka. As a matter of fact, I think I even have one in my collection that there's some discussion. I've had several people say it's an Andamuka, then I had some other people think it's from Lightning Ridge, but going back to that question on the black, that's a tough one to answer because I have to see it. But what my intention for that picture was not for it to be an Andamuka black. It was to show that the ironstone sometimes can be affected by the manganese. But there is Andamuka black. Now, if Russ, you might be more familiar with that than I. If you are, join in.
Well, yeah, what I would say is it's not the color of the rock that surrounds the opal, it's how the opal faces. So when you hold the opal in your hand and look at it, the opal part will appear to have a black body color. Otherwise, it's not a black opal.
Okay,
There were some other questions. There was questions about when to dig, if a person's going to go to a fee dig, when, where are they, and what tools to bring.
Okay, I'm going to talk about that next week, but briefly. Like if you go up to Opal Butte, they only allow 6, you have to register. They only allow 6 miners in there at one time. And it's like $100 a bucket or $100 a day, or I can't remember exactly, but anyway, this is up in Oregon, and they have the tools that you need. But what I would suggest, if you want to go to Spencer, which I don't think is working right now, they have all these places have websites. Give that website a peek, and they'll tell you how to register, how much it costs, when they dig, what times, what seasons. Like some mining, like I like to travel during the weekday because there's no people, but some of the digs up there aren't open on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday because there's, most people are there Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. So, it depends on the particular dig.
We have another question, which is, when the Andamuka has sugared, does that affect the opal or the matrix?
The matrix. what it is, sugar, when you heat the sugar up, it breaks it down somewhat. Now I'm going to use a term molecular, but that's not quite the way it works. But it makes the sugar very, very, very fluid. And what happens with the antimuka matrix, the carbon from the sugar gets impregnated into the antimuka matrix. Not only it gets in there maybe 1 or 2 millimeters at the most. So if you have to reshape it, you might have to recook it. But it changes the color of the matrix so that the color flecks will show up more. So when you're looking at that concrete, you can't see them too well. But if you darken the background, it brings out the color. If you've ever seen a piece of Honduran opal, it's very much like that. Honduran opal is basically little flecks of precious opal in a basalt. And when you polish it up, it looks really nice. And, well, as you saw. Okay? So it affects it affects the rock, not the opal itself. Anything else?
No other questions.
Okay. Wrong clicker. All right, so where do we find opal? I think are we almost out of time? Okay. Carol, we're almost out of time?
We have probably another 15 minutes or so.
Okay, where do we find opal? Well, we find opal. Now, I said my title of this lecture was An Introduction to Opal featuring Australian opal. So all of the opal you've seen today and that I'm going to talk about for the next 10 minutes is all Australian. Now, next week, I'm going to talk about opals of North and South America. Okay, so currently, Australia produces about 95% of the precious opal used in jewelry. Okay, now there are 3 provinces or 3 states in Australia that have opal producing rock, and each one of those states has a slightly different character to the opal that's dug there. In South Australia, you find a lot of the light seamed opal. You're talking about like Cooper Pedy type stuff. Queensland, this is where the boulder opal comes from, and the boulder matrix, that kind of stuff. The antimuka matrix we talked about a few minutes ago. And in South Wales, we got Lightning Ridge. This is where we get that real dark base, really fiery, bright, knock your socks off type opal. And to explain where that is, again, map. Note the dark area here. That dark area is called the Great Artesian Basin. And it's called the Great Artesian Basin for a number of reasons, which I'll get to in the next slide. But remember I said just a few minutes ago that about 95% of the opal used in jewelry comes from Australia. Well, probably about, I don't know, 90% of that comes from here, comes from the Great Artesian Basin. Now, if you notice, I don't know if I can do this again without screwing things up. Come down. Okay, now notice that around here, okay, that's where most of the opal is, on the outside of this basin. Now there's a few scattered parts in here, which we'll get to in a minute, particularly this area right in here. Okay, we'll talk about that a little bit down the road. All right, so I'm going to get rid of this. Okay, so this is where most of the opal comes from. Now, the reason this thing is called the Great Artesian Basin is a couple of days ago, it looked like this on the left, okay? Now, as time passed, these parts of land congealed and formed Australia. Now, notice this area on the, well, I took my pencil away, but on the right-hand side of that diagram, you're going to see a big hole. It looks like a triangle, okay? That's what the Great Artesian Basin is. Now, what happens is all around, as the plate tectonics occurs and all that good stuff, it pushed together in this area, And all around this area, it raised the topography to a given relief, whatever it is, depending where you're at. But the Great Artesian Basin was a shallow inland sea for quite a while. And one of the reasons Lightning Ridge has got the black base is because that area was very shallow. It had a lot of organic material. So as that material died, it stained whatever stained the rock. So the Lightning Ridge area has a lot of black base opal, and that's kind of the reason in a nutshell. Okay, so we know that the Great Artesian Basin is where most of the opal comes from. Now I'm going to take a quick look at 3 different opal areas. Coober Pedy. This is just a shot of Coober Pedy from the air. It's about 170 kilometers north of Adelaide. So you're going to say, okay, where the hell is that? Right. I'm sorry, where the heck is that? Okay, so here's Adelaide, and that's Coober Pedy up here, okay? Now, why is it called Coober Pedy? Comes from Aboriginal term Coopa. I'm going to say pity, I don't know. Anyway, it means white man in a hole. Now, in this area, most of the opal mining, they started with vertical shafts. So they had to dig round holes, and they would go down to the opal layer. Well, the Aborigines saw these white guys hanging out in these holes. So we get Coober Pedy. Okay, now, speaking of living in a hole, you've often heard about people living underground in Australia. Well, this is how they live. Not too shabby. Looks better than my place. All right? So, living in a hole. Coober Pedy. Reason? It's too hot. It gets to be, sometimes in the summer, it can get to be, 50 degrees centigrade, which is about 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, in the Coober Pedy area, most of the mining is done by tunneling. How do they get that equipment in there? Well, sometimes the tunnels can come in from the side of a cliff, or sometimes they might have to take it down one of those holes I showed you. Well, so what they do is they take it apart, take the parts down, reassemble it, and then they can go ahead and do their mining. Okay, in this picture, I want you to take note to that pipe on the left-hand side. You see that big pipe there? Okay, so why is that pipe important? This is why that pipe's important. If you look at both of these tools, along the rig on the left, you'll see that pipe goes up to a bucket. The one on the right, the same thing. The pipe goes up to what's called a trip bucket. When they get enough muck in that bucket, the bucket will turn over. And then they take that muck, and then that's where they work looking for the opal. Of course, unless they find some by hand, then they take it up in the bucket. But so when you look at Coober Pedy from the air, you see all those mounds. Okay, that's where those mounds come from. This is one of the digging areas. And this is what they're looking for. They're looking for opal and seams. Now, this is Coober Pedy. I want to call it rough rubs, for lack of a better term. It doesn't quite look this clean when it comes out of the ground, but yet once you get those little seams I just showed you, you can clean it up. And sometimes when opal is in this condition, they use the term rubs. And this is some finished stuff from Coober Pedy. Now, notice that most of the is light and this dark gray. This borders on that gray 5 or gray 4, whatever it is. Okay. Next area we're going to take a quick look at is Lightning Ridge. This is where we get the black opals from. All right, Lightning Ridge from the air. It almost looks like downtown LA, huh? With all those bushes. All right, so where's it at? It's about 180 kilometers north of Adelaide. I think I duplicated that slide. I'm sorry. Anyway, now, why do you think they call it Lightning Ridge? Any clues? Okay. Again, most of the tunneling, most of the mining here is done underground. Again, they'll take the bucket up with a Lewis and all that good stuff, or they'll suck it up. Or sometimes machinery, you want to get down and dirty if you find a nice pocket. I don't know if I'd want to crack it using a machine, but so you can do a little bit by hand. Now, if they find an area where they find an awful lot of opal in a condensed area, they will do open pit mining, okay, because it's more economical that way instead of trying to follow a vein underground. All right, this is what you're looking for when you're digging at Lightning Ridge. The parcel on the left, I would say, would be a fair parcel for them. But what you're looking for is the stuff on the right. And if you can find it, okay. Just one term with Lightning Ridge. You're going to hear this term knobby. And this term knobby is unique to Lightning Ridge. It's a type of opal. It's a type of opal that it's independent. It's not in a seam. It's not in a pocket. They're just here and there. And if these knobbies supposedly, like this, well, are supposed to produce pretty good color. I've never had to. I've never listened to this. I've never had to deal one. I've never had the opportunity to deal one, so I don't know exactly what good means. Okay. What did I do there? Oh, this is an example of some high-grade Lightning Ridge black. Okay, notice again the term black is the base color, not necessarily the color that's showing. All right, the last area we're going to talk about real quick, is Queensland, and this is one of the 6 provinces. Now, what we're going to be talking about is this area right here, this green area. This is where most of the boulder opal comes from. Now, this isn't. Don't take this to the bank and say, okay, this is exactly the amount of money I want to deposit. This is just a generalization. Now, there's other minerals in Queensland. There's all kinds of stuff. But anyway, we're only talking about opal. Now, again, most of the mining in this area is done open pit. Okay. And what we're looking for is this. This is probably the only place in the world that has this. And the reason I'd be only, because you never know, somebody might find something somewhere. It's similar, but currently this seems to be the only place you can find boulder opal. This is pretty rough stuff here. And if you split some, or sometimes you find facing. Now there's a term called painted lady, and which really still confuses me. I'm not sure exactly how to describe it. Can you do that, Russ?
It's a layer of opal on the surface of the rock. Your picture on the left, it could be considered a painted lady. They tended to be pink. The opal color play tended from the lower frequencies. And the concept was just a thin sheet of opal, hardly thick enough to do anything with it. And they threw them away.
Okay. All right. Kind of an example of what you can do with some of this matrix opal. Now, going back to that term matrix. Now, this is boulder matrix. This would be like Kuwait, or how do you say it word? Kuwait? I never can say that word. But anyway, that's where you find a lot of this type of opal. And this is kind of cleaned up rough. And again, this is what you would get from that. Okay, I think I covered all the bases that I wanted to cover. Is there anybody got a question about something we didn't cover? Or do we even have time?
We have time for a couple of questions if you have any, Russ.
I think they got covered. The only one left was the question about where would someone be able to get a copy of the presentation.
Well, it is being recorded on Facebook Live, and they can also go to the MUZEO website, www.museo.org, and they'll be able to find the information there. I think there are a couple of questions that I had, or I have, but I think I'm going to hold them till next time because it has to do with the difference between the Australians and the maybe some of the other places, the Americas, and the mining and the difference between the opals. I'm going to hold off.
Okay, well, I can give you a real quick answer, a one-shot answer. Australia, sedimentary rocks. North and South America, volcanic rock.
How about Ethiopia?
I believe there are several mining areas. There's the initial mining area, which I had, from my reading about that, I got the feeling it was sort of like a volcanic area. But the ones where they're getting this more stable stuff from, I'm gonna bet is probably more sedimentary. However, I will have an answer for you on that specifically next week.
Okay. And is there a particular mining season? Does this happen? Is there a particular mining season if you're interested in mining, not on a big scale like they do in Australia, but just on your own? Is there a time?
Again, it depends on what kind of weather you can tolerate and whether the weather's safe. Like up in the Northwest, a lot of rain. So being in the backcountry on slippery rocks and stuff like that may not be good. But if you check the websites of the different places that allow it, they'll tell you what their season is.
Okay.
So it varies.
Yeah. And do you need special licenses or any special types of equipment?
In this country, I haven't seen any. In Australia, you get you can get a FOSSIC permit, and what's the other term, Russ? Not FOSSIC, but when you grub through the piles.
Fossicking, yeah, it's the
There's
idea
another
that
term
you can
for
go
it.
out and look in the places where people have had a mine and they've left behind the material they dug out, and they don't always find everything. So fossicking is a process of looking in somebody else's tailings after they've abandoned the mine.
Yeah, and I think in some areas they require you to get a permit. But as far in all the reading I've done here and what little I've been involved, I've never had to get a permit. Well, one time when I was in college, I lived in San Diego, went to San Diego State University, and I was looking for tourmaline. And back then, in order to get to the Tourmaline King mine, you had to go across the Indian property. So in order to do that, you had to go to the Indian office and pay $2 to get a territorial pass so you could cross over the Indian land. But I think that's the only time that I've ever had to pay a fee for anything. But this, of course, it's not related to Opal.
Yeah. And
Right.
So if there are people who would like to have this experience of, going out on a dig, can they do that through an organization like yours?
That's one of our goals, is to, after this COVID thing, we would like to organize some digs. Now, again, as we mentioned earlier, or as Weston mentioned earlier, our focus is on Opal. Okay, so that might require us to do a little travel. It might be a little over weekend stuff, that kind of thing. But those are things that are in the works.
Okay. And, you know, I just got a little prompt on something, on a question from, let me just see if I can find it now. And then maybe that will be the last of the questions that we're able to do today. And I cannot find them. I am sorry, and there were questions from Michael. Maybe, sorry about that. Oh, hang on, there they are.
Yeah, on.
No.
Just one quick second.
It's not on yet.
Jerry, you're
Oh,
right.
Michael wanted to know about having the dig sites added to the chat. And what we can do is make sure that we get those,
Have to speak up.
so he's able to do that.
They wanted to know where the fee sites were.
Yes, you mentioned earlier that there were dig sites. And so it's just a matter of Michael wanting to know where.
Yeah, next week I'll give you a list of a couple.
Okay, and you
There's
mentioned
a lot
also,
of them, but I'll give you the biggies.
yes, and you also mentioned that there were differences and some similarities between the Ethiopian opals and the Australian opals. So we'll talk about that next week.
Yes.
So I think that will probably do it for us today. Did you have a quick question?
A very quick question. The museum, where is it?
It's
And
in
what do you specialize in?
It is in downtown Anaheim, Anaheim Boulevard and Broadway. And we have both a historic building where we have exhibitions. It's an old Carnegie Library, and it's been transformed into gallery space. So we have exhibits by local artists, as well as studio space and presentation space where we do programs like this if we were able to do it in person. And then we have a main gallery that is the main MUZEO gallery where we have traveling exhibits. And we just ended, unfortunately, not a lot of people were able to see it because it happened during this whole time of the pandemic. But on November the 14th, in the main gallery, we will be opening our MUZEO Express, which is our train exhibit that will be available to the community through reservations and, you know, all the guidelines that we have to have in place in order for your safety and the safety of our staff. And you can go on our website and see some of the previous exhibits that we've had. Some of them are even available virtually, but we do programs like this all the time.
Thank you.
Our website is www.museo.org. So thank you for asking that question. As we close, I just reminded you of our MUZEO website, www.museo.org. And you'll be able to access this recording as well as others that we've done. We appreciate you letting us know your thoughts on this program. We want to continue to offer relevant programs to our community. And if you'd like to support the MUZEO, we're open for that as well. Just click on the donate button. I'd like to thank Berkenda for all the work behind the scenes. You didn't see her, but she was the one making sure that we were on Facebook Live and doing what we needed to do technically. So thank you. And without a doubt to Russ for your input and questions and additional information for the fabulous Santa Claus, Mr. Goetz. You know, you've enlightened us so much on opals. I was taking copious notes as we were going through. This is the first in a series of 3. The next one will be October 4th, same time, 1 o'clock, and you will still have to register as you did today to get your personalized code for entrance into the Zoom. And then the following week after that will be the 11th, and we'll be doing even more, talking about the nuances of purchasing opals and taking care of them. I'd like to just say a special thank you. I know there's so many things that you could be doing on a Sunday afternoon. And so I really appreciate you taking the time to spend with us. So on behalf of the Museum and Cultural Center in downtown Anaheim, thank you, our viewing audience, for tuning in. Stay well, stay safe, stay healthy until October 4th. Thank you so much.
The
Thank you.